The Force had existed for millennia, binding the galaxy together in an endless dance of light and shadow. It had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the birth and death of stars, and the eternal struggle between those who sought balance and those who craved dominion. But never, in all its vast and ancient memory, had it reached across the void between realities to pull something, someone, from a world it had never touched. Until now. The lower levels of Coruscant's industrial district erupted in a cascade of impossible light. Workers fled as reality itself seemed to tear, a rift of silver and gold splitting the air above a decommissioned landing platform. The phenomenon lasted only seconds, but in those seconds, the Force screamed. Every Jedi in the temple felt it, a presence, alien and pure, crashing into their galaxy like a stone thrown into still water. When the light faded, a figure lay crumpled on the platform's durasteel surface. Frodo Baggins opened his eyes to a sky that was wrong. Not the ash-choked darkness of Mordor. Not the star-filled peace of the Shire. This sky was a tapestry of endless traffic, ships of metal and light streaming between towers that pierced the clouds. The air tasted of ozone and fuel, and the sounds, by the Valar, the sounds, were a cacophony of engines, distant voices speaking in languages he'd never heard, and a low, thrumming hum that seemed to vibrate through his very bones. He pushed himself up, his hands, still bearing the scars where Gollum had bitten away his finger, pressing against a surface harder and colder than any stone in Middle-earth. His mithril coat clinked softly beneath his travel-worn cloak, and at his side, Sting remained sheathed. But his hand instinctively went to his chest, expecting to find the weight of the chain, the terrible burden of the One Ring. Instead, his fingers closed around something else. Frodo pulled it from beneath his shirt and stared. A crystal, the length of his forearm, pulsed in his grip. Deep crimson light throbbed within its facets like a living heartbeat, and shadows seemed to writhe beneath its surface. It was beautiful and terrible all at once, and the moment his skin made contact with its surface, he felt it. A whisper, seductive and cold, promising power beyond measure, dominion over all who would oppose him, the strength to protect everything he loved and destroy everything he feared. No. The word formed in his mind with absolute clarity. He had carried the ring to the fires of Mount Doom. He had felt its corruption claw at his soul every step of the way, had nearly succumbed at the very end. But he had learned. He understood the nature of such things now, the seduction of power, the lie of control. This crystal, whatever it was, spoke with the same voice the ring had used. Different words, perhaps, but the same terrible song. "I know you," Frodo whispered to the crystal, his voice hoarse. "And I will not listen." He forced himself to his feet, tucking the crystal back beneath his shirt where its malevolent light couldn't be seen. His legs trembled. Whether from the journey between worlds or simple exhaustion, he couldn't say. But he remained standing. Around him, the platform was abandoned, but he could see figures moving in the distance, silhouettes against the city's glow. A sound made him turn. Something was approaching from the shadows of a nearby alley. No, multiple somethings. Frodo's hand went to Sting's hilt, and the moment his fingers touched the elvish blade, it erupted with brilliant blue light. 3 figures emerged into the platform's dim illumination. They wore armor unlike anything Frodo had seen, white and segmented, covering them completely, with strange visors where their faces should be. Each carried a weapon, sleek rifles of black metal that hummed with barely contained energy. They moved with military precision, fanning out to surround him, unidentified sentient, one of them said, his voice distorted through the helmet's speakers. "You are in violation of Coruscant security protocols. Identify yourself and state your business in this sector." Frodo didn't understand most of the words. Sentient, Coruscant, protocols. But he understood a challenge when he heard one. And he understood the tone of armed men deciding whether he was a threat. "My name is Frodo Baggins," he said. keeping his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I don't know where I am or how I got here, but I mean no harm. I'm lost." The three figures exchanged glances, though Frodo couldn't read their expressions through those blank visors. One of them raised a hand to the side of his helmet, speaking too quietly for Frodo to hear. After a moment, the same soldier stepped forward. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us. This area is restricted, and you're carrying—" The soldier stopped, his head tilting as if seeing something new. "Is that sword glowing?" Sting's light intensified in Frodo's grip, the blue radiance casting sharp shadows across the platform. And suddenly, Frodo understood. The blade had been forged in Gondolin, crafted by elven smiths to warn of servants of the enemy. It glowed in the presence of orcs, of darkness, of corruption. It was glowing now, not because of these soldiers, but because of something else, something approaching. The explosion came without warning. One of the structures bordering the platform erupted in flame and debris, and through the smoke came a flight of droids, spindly, insectoid things with blasters for arms, their photoreceptors glowing red in the darkness. They opened fire immediately, bolts of superheated plasma screaming through the air. The soldiers reacted with trained efficiency, returning fire and shouting into their helmets for backup. Frodo threw himself behind a cargo container as the world became chaos. Blaster bolts punched through metal, sparked off durasteel, filled the air with the stench of burning ozone. "We've got a full Separatist assault squad," one soldier shouted. "Requesting immediate—" The blast that cut him off sent the soldier flying, his armor scorched and smoking. The other two tried to hold the line, but more droids were pouring through the breach, dozens of them. And Frodo realized with cold certainty that these men would die protecting this platform, protecting him. He couldn't allow that, not when he could act. Frodo drew Sting fully, the elvish blade singing as it left its sheath. The weapon was small by the standards of men, little more than a long dagger, but in his hands it was perfectly balanced, an extension of his will. And while he was no warrior like Aragorn or Boromir, he had faced the horrors of Mordor, had stabbed Shelob herself, had survived when greater heroes had fallen. He would not cower now. A battle droid turned toward him, its vocabulator crackling with surprised sounds as it processed this new target. Small, unarmed by its sensor's estimation, negligible threat. It raised its blaster. Frodo was already moving. The droid's shot went wide as Frodo rolled beneath it, coming up inside its guard. Sting swept across its midsection, and the elvish steel, forged with enchantments older than this galaxy, sheared through the droid's chassis like it was parchment. Sparks erupted as the machine collapsed in two pieces, its photoreceptors dimming. Two more droids turned their weapons on him. Frodo ducked behind their fallen comrade as blaster fire peppered the platform around him, then lunged forward with speed born of desperate necessity. His mithril coat turned a glancing shot that should have killed him, the energy dissipating across the dwarven alloy without leaving a mark. Sting found the first droid's neck joint, then the second's central processor. The remaining clone troopers stared at him in open astonishment. "What in the Force?" The platform shuddered as something massive landed on its surface. Frodo spun to face the new threat and felt his heart sink. It was a droid, but unlike the others, this one was large, heavily armored, with shield generators crackling around its frame. A destroyer droid, though Frodo had no name for it. It unfolded from its rolling form, twin blasters already tracking toward the clone trooper. Frodo didn't think. He simply moved, placing himself between the soldier and the droid. His free hand went to his chest, where the crystal pulsed against his skin, and for just a moment, he felt its whisper intensify. "Use me. Channel my power. Destroy them all." "No," Frodo said aloud. The destroyer droid fired. Multiple bolts of plasma converged on Frodo's position, enough firepower to vaporize a reinforced bunker. But Frodo raised Sting, and somehow, through some confluence of elvish magic and the strange energy of this galaxy, The blade caught the first bolt, deflecting it into the platform's surface. The second shot struck his mithril coat and scattered. The third missed entirely as Frodo threw himself into a roll, coming up closer to the machine. Too close for its weapons to track. Sting plunged into the gap beneath the droid's shield, finding the vulnerable joint where its leg met its body. The blade sank deep, and Frodo twisted with all his strength. Something crucial severed. The droid toppled, its shields flickering out, and Frodo drove Sting into its central core. Silence fell across the platform, broken only by the distant sounds of the city and the crackling of small fires. The clone trooper approached slowly, his rifle lowered but not quite aimed away. What are you?" Frodo pulled Sting free, the blade still glowing faintly blue, and met the soldier's hidden gaze. "I'm a hobbit," he said simply, "from a place called the Shire, and I think I'm very far from home." Before the soldier could respond, the air around them changed. It was subtle at first, a pressure, a presence, like the moment before a storm breaks. Frodo felt the hairs on his neck rise, and the crystal against his chest grew suddenly hot. 3 figures descended from the sky, landing with impossible grace on the platform's surface. They wore robes of brown and tan, and each carried a cylindrical device at their belt. As Frodo watched, 2 of them ignited their weapons. Blades of pure light, one green and one blue, humming with barely contained power. The third figure, an older man with a graying beard and eyes that seemed to see straight through Frodo, stepped forward. His hand rested on his own weapon, unignited, but his attention was fixed entirely on Frodo. "I am Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi," the man said, his voice measured and calm. "And I think you and I need to have a very long conversation about what you're carrying." Frodo's hand instinctively went to his chest, where the corrupted Kyber Crystal pulsed with dark hunger. Around him, the Jedi formed a loose triangle, not quite threatening, but certainly not allowing escape. In the distance, more ships were approaching, their lights cutting through Coruscant's eternal twilight. He had carried a burden once before, across an entire world, to cast it into the fires that made it. He had resisted its call, survived its corruption, and lost a part of himself in the process. Now, it seemed, he would have to do it all again. But in a galaxy where the very nature of good and evil was at war, where ancient orders wielded powers he didn't understand, and where the simple courage of a hobbit from the Shire might be the only thing standing between hope and absolute darkness. Frodo straightened his shoulders, meeting Obi-Wan's gaze without flinching. "I'll talk," he said quietly. "But first, you need to understand something. What I carry is dangerous beyond measure. It whispers, it corrupts, it promises power, and delivers only destruction." His voice grew stronger, carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom. "I have carried such a burden before, Master Kenobi, and I know that the only way to truly defeat it is to never, ever give in to what it offers." Obi-Wan's expression shifted. Surprise, respect, and something that might have been recognition. "Then perhaps," the Jedi said slowly, "you understand more about the Force than you realize. Come, the Council will want to hear your story." As they escorted him toward their waiting ship, Frodo cast one last look at the platform where his impossible journey had begun. Somewhere in this vast galaxy, there was surely a place for him, a way to complete this new quest, a mountain where this new burden could be unmade. He had done it once. By all the courage the Shire had given him, he would find a way to do it again. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The Jedi Temple rose above Coruscant like a mountain of ancient stone and modern artifice, its 5 spires reaching toward stars that Frodo had never seen. As their shuttle descended toward one of the temple's countless landing platforms, he pressed his face against the viewport, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of everything. In the Shire, the tallest structure had been the old mill. Here, buildings stretched so high they disappeared into clouds, and the entire city seemed to pulse with a living energy that made his skin tingle. "First time off-world?" asked the younger Jedi sitting across from him, Anakin Skywalker, as he'd introduced himself. The young man had an easy confidence that reminded Frodo of Boromir, all swagger and barely contained power. His Padawan, Ahsoka Tano, sat beside him, her exotic features, Montrals, she'd called them, marking her as one of the Togruta species. She'd been eyeing Frodo with undisguised curiosity since they'd boarded. "First time off-world," Frodo confirmed, then added quietly, "First time in a different world entirely, I think." Obi-Wan, who'd been speaking softly into a communication device, turned his attention back to Frodo. "You've mentioned that several times now, that you're from somewhere called Middle-earth, which exists in another reality entirely. Forgive my skepticism, but such things are unprecedented in the Republic's records." "And yet," Frodo said, touching the crystal beneath his shirt, he'd refused to remove it, and the Jedi had, surprisingly, allowed him to keep it. "I'm here, and so is this." He withdrew the crystal just enough for them to see its pulsing red light. All three Jedi recoiled slightly, their hands moving unconsciously toward their lightsabers. "The dark side," Ahsoka whispered. "Master, can you feel it? It's like it's screaming." "I feel it," Obi-Wan said grimly. "A Kyber Crystal, corrupted beyond anything I've encountered. The Sith use such crystals in their lightsabers, bleeding them through pain and hatred until they turn red. But this," he leaned closer, his eyes narrowing, "this feels older, angrier, as if it's been steeped in darkness for centuries." "Millennia, more likely," Frodo said softly. "Where I come from, there was an object of great evil. A ring, forged by a dark lord to dominate all free peoples. I was chosen, or perhaps cursed, to carry it to its destruction. I resisted its call for months, Master Kenobi. Every day, every hour, it whispered to me. Promises of power, of safety, of the ability to protect everyone I loved. And every day, I had to choose to resist." He met Obi-Wan's gaze steadily. "When I woke here, the ring was gone. But this crystal, it speaks with the same voice. Different words, perhaps, but the same terrible hunger." Anakin leaned forward, his expression intense. "You said you destroyed this ring. How?" "I carried it to the mountain where it was made, the only place its power could be unmade. Mount Doom, we called it. A volcano at the heart of the enemy's realm." Frodo's voice grew distant with memory. "I walked through a wasteland of ash and death, hunted by creatures of nightmare, betrayed by someone I'd tried to save. And at the very end, when I stood at the precipice where the ring could be destroyed, I failed." The admission hung in the air like a physical thing. Ahsoka looked shocked, but Obi-Wan's expression was thoughtful, almost compassionate. "Failed how?" the older Jedi asked gently. "I claimed it," Frodo said, his voice barely above a whisper. "At the very end, after everything, the ring's power overwhelmed me. I put it on. I declared it mine." He raised his right hand, showing them where his finger was missing. "Only chance, or providence, saved us all. The creature who'd been hunting us attacked, bit off my finger to take the ring, and fell into the fire with it. I was saved not by my own strength, but by mercy I'd shown months before." The shuttle settled onto the landing platform with barely a whisper of repulsor lifts. As the ramp descended, Frodo could see dozens of robed figures waiting. More Jedi, their expressions ranging from curiosity to concern to outright suspicion. "That's quite a story," Anakin said as they stood. "But here's the thing, the Force can sense deception, and everything you've said, it feels true." He glanced at Obi-Wan. "Master." "It does," Obi-Wan agreed. "Which presents us with a rather significant problem. If what you carry is as dangerous as you claim, Frodo, then we cannot allow it to fall into separatist hands. Or worse, into the hands of Count Dooku and his master. Separatists? Frodo asked as they descended the ramp. Dooku? I'm afraid I don't understand any of this. Ahsoka fell into step beside him, clearly appointed as his guide. Quick version. The galaxy is at war. The Galactic Republic, that's us, the good guys, is fighting against the Separatist Alliance, who want to break away and form their own government. Leading the Separatists is Count Dooku, who used to be a Jedi but fell to the dark side and became a Sith Lord. Sith, Frodo repeated. You've mentioned them before. They use these corrupted crystals? They do, Obi-Wan said. The Sith are the ancient enemies of the Jedi. Where we serve the light side of the Force, seeking peace and justice, they embrace the dark side, passion, anger, hatred, the desire for power above all else. For 1,000 years, we thought them extinct. We were wrong. They entered the temple proper, and Frodo found himself in a hall so vast it could have contained all of Hobbiton 3 times over. Jedi moved through the space with purpose, their robes flowing, some deep in conversation, others walking in meditative silence. Several stopped to stare at Frodo. Apparently, hobbits were as unusual here as Jedi would have been in the Shire. The council is waiting, Obi-Wan said, gesturing toward a turbolift. They'll want to examine both you and the crystal. I should warn you, some of them may seem harsh, but they're only trying to protect the Republic. I understand, Frodo said. I've stood before wizards and elf lords, Master Kenobi. I may be small and far from home, but I'm not easily intimidated. Anakin laughed at that. I like him already. The council chamber was circular, with tall windows offering a panoramic view of Coruscant's endless skyline. 12 seats arranged in a circle, and in each seat sat a member of the Jedi High Council, the wisest and most powerful Jedi in the galaxy. Frodo recognized the variety of species immediately. This galaxy's diversity made even the varied peoples of Middle-earth seem limited by comparison. "Approach, you may," said a small, ancient being sitting in one of the chairs. His voice was rough with age but carried absolute authority. "Master Yoda, I am. Questions we have. Answers you will provide." Frodo walked to the center of the circle, very conscious of every eye upon him. He'd felt less exposed, standing before the throne of Denethor, steward of Gondor, but he kept his back straight and his voice steady as he said, "I'll answer what I can, Master Yoda. Though I confess, much of what's happened is as mysterious to me as it is to you." A Syrian Jedi with an elongated head spoke next. "I am Ki-Adi-Mundi. Master Kenobi has briefed us on your unusual arrival. You claim to be from another reality entirely." "I don't claim it," Frodo said. "I simply know it to be true. I fell asleep in my own world and woke in yours. How or why, I cannot say." A dark-skinned human Jedi leaned forward. "I am Mace Windu. Show us this crystal you carry." Slowly, Frodo reached beneath his shirt, withdrew the corrupted Kyber Crystal. The moment it came into full view, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Several Jedi shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and Master Yoda's ears flattened against his head. "Powerful, that darkness is," Yoda said softly. "Centuries of corruption, I sense. Perhaps longer. Touch it, may I?" Frodo hesitated, then slowly extended the crystal toward Yoda. But as the ancient Jedi reached for it, Frodo felt the crystal's whisper intensify. Not words, exactly, but a feeling of wrongness, a violation at the thought of another touching it. His fingers closed protectively around it. "I'm sorry," he said, pulling it back. It doesn't want to be touched. I know how that sounds, but I've learned to trust these feelings. The ring was the same way. It would try to return to its master, would manipulate events and people to achieve its goals. This crystal is similar. "And yet you resist its influence," observed a Togruta Jedi Master. "Not Ahsoka, but clearly of the same species. How?" "Practice," Frodo said with a bitter smile. "And the memory of what surrendering to such power costs. I've seen what corruption does, Master. I've felt it gnawing at my soul, day after day, until I could barely remember who I'd been before. I learned to recognize its voice, to wall off a part of my mind that remained myself. He looked down at the crystal. This thing wants me to use it, to tap into its power. It promises that I could protect myself, could end this war you're fighting, could become something greater than I am, but I know what I would lose in the bargain. Mace Windu exchanged a long look with Yoda. That kind of resistance to the dark side is remarkable, especially from someone who isn't Force-sensitive. Wait, Anakin said from his position behind Frodo. You're saying he can't use the Force? Sense it in him, I do not, Yoda confirmed. Yet resist the dark side, he does, with strength that rivals a Jedi Master's. Interesting, this is. Most interesting. It also presents a problem, Mace said. If the Separatists detected the same energy spike we did when you arrived, they'll be looking for you. And if Dooku learns of this crystal's existence... He didn't finish the sentence, but his meaning was clear. Then I need to destroy it, Frodo said simply. Just as I destroyed the ring. There must be somewhere in this galaxy where such a thing can be unmade. Some place of power, or heat, or whatever it takes. Not so simple it is, Yoda said. Kyber crystals, living things are, part of the Force itself. Corrupt them, you can. Purify them, perhaps. But destroy them. He shook his head slowly. Never heard of such a thing, I have. Frodo felt his heart sink. Then what am I supposed to do with it? I can't keep carrying this forever. I'm not strong enough. Strong enough you have been so far, Yoda pointed out. And study this, we must. Perhaps an answer the archives hold. Perhaps the Force itself will show us the way. He looked around at the other council members. Protect him, we will. And the crystal, study we shall. Agreed? The council members nodded one by one, though several looked less than happy about the decision. There's something else, Obi-Wan said. The droids that attacked when we found him. They were specifically targeting his location. The Separatists knew where to look. A tracking device? Ki-Adi-Mundi suggested. I don't think so, Obi-Wan replied. I think they could sense the crystal's dark side energy, just as we could, which means... The temple shuddered. It was subtle, but every Jedi in the room felt it. A disturbance in the Force, sharp and violent, approaching fast. Alarms began to wail throughout the temple. Mace was on his feet instantly, his comlink already in his hand. Report! Separatist attack! A voice crackled through the device. Multiple ships breaching the defensive perimeter. They're heading straight for the temple. Impossible, Ki-Adi-Mundi said. Coruscant's defenses should have detected them long before... They don't care about defenses, Anakin interrupted, his hand on his lightsaber. They're not trying to invade. They're trying to retrieve something. His eyes locked on Frodo. They're coming for the crystal. Through the council chamber's windows, Frodo could see ships descending through the clouds. Angular, aggressive craft bristling with weapons. Behind them came larger vessels, and from their bays poured hundreds of the same droids that had attacked him earlier. Evacuate the younglings, Mace commanded. All available Jedi to defensive positions. Masters Kenobi and Skywalker, protect Frodo and secure the crystal, Obi-Wan finished. We understand. No, Frodo said, surprising them all. His hand had gone to Sting's hilt, and the blade was already beginning to glow. You can't evacuate everyone in time, and you can't fight while worrying about protecting me. I'm not helpless, Masters. I've faced armies before. You're one small person against... Ahsoka began. Against thousands, yes, I know. Frodo interrupted gently. But I have something they want, which makes me the perfect bait. Draw them toward me, concentrate their forces, and your Jedi can strike where they're weakest. It's what Gandalf would call strategy. Anakin grinned fiercely. I really do like him. Reckless, this plan is, Yoda said, but there was a glint in his ancient eyes. Also, effective it may be. Courage you have, small one, but alone you will not be. The ancient Jedi stood, gripping his Gymer stick, and suddenly Frodo felt the presence he'd been sensing since entering the temple crystallize into something tangible. Power radiated from Yoda like heat from a forge. Not the corrupting darkness of the crystal, but something clean and bright, and absolutely unyielding. "Protect you I will," Yoda said, "and teach you something, perhaps, about bearing burdens." The temple shook again as the first separatist ships opened fire. Through the windows, Frodo could see streams of laser fire crossing the sky, Republic fighters scrambling to intercept, and wave after wave of battle droids descending toward the temple's platforms. He drew Sting fully, the elvish blade blazing with blue light in response to the approaching darkness. The crystal pulsed against his chest, eager, hungry, whispering that now was the time to unleash its power, to show these invaders what true strength looked like. Frodo closed his eyes briefly, shutting out that seductive voice, and thought of the Shire, of green hills and peaceful gardens, of friendship and simple courage, of Sam, who'd carried him when he could no longer carry himself. "I'm ready," he said, opening his eyes. And as the Battle of the Jedi Temple began, a hobbit from another world stood beside the greatest warriors this galaxy had ever known, and prepared to prove that the smallest person could make the greatest difference. The Separatist assault hit the Jedi Temple like a hammer against glass, brutal, sudden, and overwhelming in its intensity. Frodo stood on one of the temple's outer platforms, Yoda beside him and a dozen Jedi Knights forming a protective semicircle around them. Below and above, the battle raged in 3 dimensions as Republic gunships exchanged fire with Separatist craft, filling the sky with tracers and explosions. "Stay close, you must," Yoda instructed, his voice calm despite the chaos. "And trust in the Force, even if feel it you cannot." "I'll trust in you, Master Yoda," Frodo replied, drawing Sting. The blade's blue glow intensified, responding to the approaching darkness. And in this, it's never failed me yet. The first wave of battle droids descended on repulsor platforms, their optical sensors immediately locking onto Frodo's position. They opened fire without hesitation, crimson blaster bolts filling the air like deadly rain. The Jedi responded instantly, their lightsabers becoming blurs of color as they deflected the incoming fire. Several bolts ricocheted back at their sources, dropping droids from their platforms. But more kept coming. Dozens became hundreds, and Frodo realized with growing dread that the Separatists weren't simply probing the temple's defenses. They were committing everything they had to this assault. The crystal pulsed against his chest, its whisper growing louder, more insistent. "Use me. Channel my power. Sweep them all away like dust." "No," Frodo said through gritted teeth. A battle droid broke through the Jedi line, its blaster tracking toward Frodo. He moved on instinct, ducking under its shot and closing the distance. Sting swept up, severing the droid's weapon, then across, cutting through its torso. The machine collapsed in a shower of sparks. "Good, that is," Yoda said, deflecting 3 bolts in rapid succession. "Fear you do not show, but careful you must be. Overwhelmed even the brave can be." As if in response to Yoda's warning, the platform shuddered under the impact of something massive. Frodo turned to see a new threat descending. Droidicas, the destroyer droids, rolling into position and unfolding with mechanical precision. Their shield generators activated, creating shimmering barriers that the Jedi's deflected blaster fire couldn't penetrate. "Those things again," Frodo muttered, remembering his encounter on the lower platform. He'd destroyed one there, but that had been alone, with the element of surprise. Here, there were at least a dozen, and they were already opening fire. The Jedi were forced back, their lightsabers useless against the combined firepower and shielding. 2 knights went down, their bodies smoking from multiple hits. Frodo felt rage building in his chest. Not his own rage, but the crystals, feeding on the violence and death around them. "They're dying because of you, because you're too weak to save them. Let me help. Just this once." Frodo's hand moved toward his chest, toward the crystal, almost against his will. His fingers brushed its surface, and power sang through him. Dark, intoxicating, promising that he could end this, that he could save everyone if he just surrendered for a moment. A small, clawed hand gripped his wrist. Yoda stood beside him, those ancient eyes boring into Frodo's soul. "See it, I do," the Jedi Master said quietly, even as chaos raged around them. "The darkness calling to you. Strong, its voice is. But stronger, you must be." "They're dying," Frodo said, his voice cracking. "Your people are dying, and I have the power to stop it." "At what cost?" Yoda interrupted. "Save them now, lose yourself forever. Seen this I have. Across centuries, watched as the well-meaning fall to darkness, believing the end justifies the means. But the dark side, a tool, it is not. A master, it becomes, always." A lightsaber, green and humming, appeared in Yoda's free hand. The ancient Jedi moved with impossible speed, becoming a blur that leaped over the droid's shields. His blade danced, cutting through their generators, their joints, their core processors. In seconds, 4 droidicas lay in ruins. But even Yoda couldn't be everywhere at once. More droids were landing, and now something else was descending through the smoke and fire. A ship, larger than the others, its hull marked with the symbol of the Separatist Alliance. Its boarding ramp extended before it even touched down, and from within emerged a figure that made every Jedi on the platform tense. Count Dooku. The former Jedi moved with aristocratic grace, his curved lightsaber hilt resting easily in his hand. He was tall, elegant, his silver hair and beard perfectly groomed despite the battlefield around him. His dark eyes swept the platform, taking in the defensive positions, the scattered droid parts, and finally settling on Frodo. "How interesting," Dooku said, his cultured voice cutting through the sounds of battle. "Master Yoda, I see you've acquired a new pet, a rather small one at that." "Pet, he is not," Yoda replied, stepping protectively in front of Frodo. "And business here, you have none, Dooku. Leave, you must." "I'm afraid I can't do that, old friend." Dooku's lightsaber ignited, its crimson blade casting harsh shadows across his features. "The boy carries something that belongs to the Sith. My master desires it. I will not disappoint him." "Your master," Frodo said, surprising himself by speaking up. "Would that be the Dark Lord you serve? The one pulling the strings of this war?" Dooku's expression shifted to one of genuine surprise. "Perceptive. Yes, my master. Darth Sidious, the true power in this galaxy. He sensed a great darkness arrive in this reality, a weapon of extraordinary potential. That crystal you carry could tip the balance of this war decisively in our favor." "It's not a weapon," Frodo said, his voice steady despite his hammering heart. "It's a curse, a corruption. I've carried such darkness before, Count Dooku, and I know where that path leads. Only to ruin, only to loss." "Spoken like a true Jedi," Dooku said with a slight smile. "How tedious." He raised his free hand, and Frodo felt something invisible grip him, lifting him off his feet. The Force, it had to be, wrapped around him like a crushing fist. "Give me the crystal, and I'll let you die quickly. Resist, and I'll take it from your corpse." Frodo couldn't breathe. His vision blurred, spots dancing across his eyes. His hand scrabbled at his chest, finding the crystal, and its voice screamed in his mind. "Fight back! Use me! Destroy him!" "No," Frodo choked out. Even suffocating, even dying, he would not surrender to that voice. Yoda's lightsaber swept through the air, and suddenly Frodo was falling, gasping for breath as he hit the platform's surface. The ancient Jedi stood between him and Dooku, his small form radiating such power that even the battle droids seemed to hesitate. "Through me, you must go," Yoda said softly, "and easy. That will not be." "I never expected it to be, Master," Dooku replied, and attacked. The duel that followed was unlike anything Frodo had ever witnessed. Both combatants moved faster than his eyes could properly track, their lightsabers weaving patterns of light and sound that defied comprehension. Yoda leaped and spun, using his small size and the Force itself to stay level with his much taller opponent. Dooku fought with precision and power, each strike calculated to exploit an opening, each parry flowing seamlessly into a counterattack. They were equals, Frodo realized with growing horror. They could fight for hours, and neither would gain a decisive advantage. And while they fought, more separatist ships were landing, more droids were deploying, and the Jedi defending the temple were being systematically overwhelmed. He had to do something. But what? He was no warrior, no wizard with great power to unleash. He was just Frodo Baggins, a hobbit from the Shire who'd been given a burden too great for anyone to bear, just as he'd been given the ring. The thought crystallized in his mind like ice. The ring. He'd carried it for months, resisting its call every day. And at Mount Doom, he'd failed. But he'd also learned something crucial. The ring wanted to be used. It needed someone to claim it, to put it on, to become its vessel. And in wanting that so desperately, it became predictable. This crystal was the same. It wanted to be wielded, to corrupt, to transform whoever touched it into an instrument of darkness. It was screaming at him right now, demanding he use its power, promising that he could end this battle, save the Jedi, defeat Dooku. But what if he gave it what it wanted? Not by using it himself, but by letting Dooku think he could take it. "Master Yoda!" Frodo shouted over the clash of lightsabers. "I have an idea, but I need you to trust me." "Trust you I do," Yoda called back, deflecting a vicious slash from Dooku. "What need you? Let him win," Frodo said, pulling the crystal free from his shirt. "Let him get close enough to take this." "Are you insane?" one of the other Jedi shouted. "That's exactly what he wants." "I know," Frodo said, his mind racing. "But I also know these corrupted things, these objects of dark power. They want to be taken. They want to promise their wielders everything, and they never, ever deliver." Yoda's ears twitched, the closest thing to a nod he could manage while fighting. "Risky this plan is, but trust you, I do. Your move. Make it." The ancient Jedi suddenly disengaged, leaping back to stand beside Frodo. Dooku advanced, his lightsaber raised, victory gleaming in his eyes. "How wise of you to surrender, Master Yoda. Your attachment to this creature does you credit, but—" "I'll give it to you," Frodo interrupted, holding up the crystal. It pulsed in his grip, its red light painting everything in shades of blood. "The crystal! Take it! Just stop this! Stop the killing!" Dooku paused, suspicion warring with desire on his face. "Just like that? You'll simply hand it over?" "I've carried a burden like this before," Frodo said, letting exhaustion and despair leak into his voice. Not entirely feigned. "I know I'm not strong enough to bear it. Not again. Better you take it than it corrupt me. At least you're already fallen." The logic was twisted, but it was the kind of twisted logic that darkness loved. Dooku's expression shifted, suspicion fading into triumph. He deactivated his lightsaber and extended his hand. "A wise choice, little one. My master will be pleased." Frodo stepped forward, the crystal extended, his other hand resting on Sting's hilt. He could feel the blade's magic responding, its blue light intensifying, could feel the crystal's rage at being denied the corruption it craved, could feel the weight of every choice that had led to this moment. Dooku's fingers closed around the crystal, and the corrupted Kyber screamed. Not aloud. Frodo wasn't sure anyone else could hear it. But in the Force, in the dark side itself, a psychic shriek of thwarted hunger. Dooku's eyes widened as power flooded through him, more than he'd expected, more than he could control. The crystal had been waiting for centuries to find a wielder, and now it had one. Someone already steeped in darkness, someone whose barriers against corruption were already broken. Dooku's face contorted as the crystal's darkness poured into him. His skin paled, his eyes turning from brown to a sickly yellow. Veins of shadow crept up his arms like poison, and his breathing became ragged, labored. What have you done?" he gasped. "Given you exactly what you wanted," Frodo said quietly, and drew Sting. The elvish blade, forged to fight darkness, forged with enchantments older than this galaxy, blazed with light that made the Jedi's lightsabers look dim by comparison. And before Dooku could react, before he could even think to defend himself, Frodo drove the blade forward. Not into Dooku. That would have been murder. And despite everything, Frodo was still a hobbit from the Shire. Instead, he stabbed the crystal itself, still clutched in Dooku's trembling hand. Sting's point struck the Kyber's surface and plunged deep. The world exploded in light. The crystal shattered, its corrupted essence detonating outward in a wave of crimson energy that threw everyone on the platform backwards. Frodo felt himself flying, felt the heat and pressure and impossible pain of darkness being forcibly unmade. He hit something hard, a wall, maybe, or the ground, and everything went white. When his vision cleared, he was lying on his back, staring up at Coruscant's smoke-filled sky. His ears rang. His body ached, but he was alive. And more importantly, the crystal was gone. Not destroyed, he realized as his mind began to work again, but broken, scattered. He could see shards of Kyber spread across the platform, each one still pulsing faintly, but the unified darkness, the concentrated evil, that was gone, dispersed, diminished. Yoda appeared above him, the ancient Jedi's face creased with concern. "Alive you are. Good, very good." "Dooku?" Frodo managed to croak. "Fled he has," Yoda said, helping Frodo sit up. "Wounded, both in body and pride, and the crystal, clever, you were. Destroy it completely, you could not, but weaken it, scatter it, make it far less dangerous. That you achieved." Around them, the separatist forces were retreating, their ships lifting off and disappearing into the upper atmosphere. Without Dooku to lead them, without the crystal to claim, they had no reason to continue the assault. The Battle of the Jedi Temple was over. But as Frodo looked at the scattered shards, at the Jedi gathering them carefully with tools and containment fields, he knew the larger story was far from finished. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," Yoda said, a slight smile crossing his ancient features. "Teach you properly, we will. Bearer of burdens you may be, but alone you are not. And in this galaxy, small you are not. Important, yes, very important indeed." Anakin and Ahsoka approached, both looking worse for wear but grinning fiercely. "That," Anakin said, "was the craziest, bravest, most reckless thing I've ever seen. And I've done some pretty stupid stuff." "It was brilliant," Ahsoka added. "You turned the crystal's power against itself, used its own hunger to make it vulnerable." "I had a good teacher," Frodo said, thinking of Gandalf, of Sam, of everyone who'd helped him carry the ring. "Someone once told me that even the smallest person can change the course of the future. I'm beginning to think that's true in any galaxy." Obi-Wan appeared, his robe singed but his expression relieved. "The Council wants to see you again, Frodo. I think we have much to discuss about your future with the Order. If you'll have us, that is." Frodo looked around at the Jedi, these strange, powerful beings who'd risked everything to protect him, who'd trusted him despite his alien nature, who'd stood beside him against impossible odds. He thought of the Shire, still impossibly distant, perhaps forever beyond his reach. And he thought of the crystal shards, still radiating faint darkness, still needing to be dealt with. He'd carried one burden across Middle-earth. Perhaps he could carry another across the stars. "I'll help however I can," Frodo said, getting to his feet with Yoda's assistance. "Though I'm not sure what use a hobbit can be to an order of warriors and mystics." "Courage, use we can always," Yoda said firmly, "and wisdom, born of suffering and choice. Those things, more valuable than any power, are. Come, much work to do we have. But first, rest you need. Earned it you have." As they walked back into the temple, Frodo cast one last look at the sky, at the alien stars that weren't his stars, at a galaxy that wasn't his home. The crystal's voice was gone, finally, truly silent for the first time since he'd awakened here. But in its absence, he could hear something else. The hum of the temple, the murmur of the Jedi, the endless living pulse of this vast, strange, wonderful galaxy. He was far from home. But perhaps, Frodo thought as Yoda's small hand rested companionably on his shoulder, he'd found something like a fellowship here. And if Middle-earth had taught him anything, it was that fellowship, true friendship and shared purpose, could carry you through even the darkest places. "Master Yoda," he said as they entered the temple proper, "tell me more about this force of yours. I'm curious about something. If it binds all living things together, if it truly connects everything in this galaxy, could it possibly reach across the void, to other realities?" Yoda's ears perked up with interest, asking, if a way home exists? "Perhaps," Frodo admitted, "but also asking if perhaps I'm here for a reason. If the Force itself brought me here because I was needed." "Questions, those are, that time must answer," Yoda said. "But ponder them together we shall. And in pondering, perhaps wisdom find we will." They disappeared into the temple's depths, a hobbit and a Jedi Master, two unlikely companions bound by the shared understanding that true strength came not from power, but from the courage to resist it. And somewhere in the shadows of Coruscant, Count Dooku clutched his wounded hand and stared at the scar where the crystal's darkness had burned him. He had failed, but worse, he had underestimated the small creature from another world. It was a mistake he would not make twice. The war continued, the galaxy turned, and Frodo Baggins, bearer of burdens, began to learn that in a galaxy far, far away, even the smallest light could hold back an ocean of darkness. 3 months had passed since the Battle of the Jedi Temple, and Frodo Baggins had learned more about this vast galaxy than he'd ever imagined possible. The Jedi archives became his refuge, endless halls of holocrons and databanks containing the accumulated knowledge of 25,000 years. He'd studied the history of the Republic, the philosophy of the Force, the endless conflicts that seemed to define this reality. And through it all, he'd worked alongside the Jedi to understand and contain the crystal shards that had scattered across Coruscant. Each shard, they discovered, retained a fraction of the original crystal's corruption. Individually, they were manageable. Dangerous, yes, but not overwhelmingly so. The Jedi had spent weeks tracking them down, using the Force to sense their dark side signatures, and Frodo had helped identify them with Sting, which still glowed blue in their presence. But containment was only a temporary solution. The shards wanted to be reunited, wanted to reform into something whole and terrible. And so the Council had made a decision, one that brought Frodo to this moment, standing on the bridge of a Republic cruiser as it dropped out of hyperspace above a world of fire and stone. "Mustafar," Obi-Wan said, standing beside Frodo at the viewport. The planet below was a nightmare of volcanic activity, its surface crisscrossed with rivers of lava, its atmosphere choked with ash and heat. One of the most inhospitable worlds in the known galaxy. If there's anywhere that can unmake your crystal shards, it's here. "It reminds me of Mordor," Frodo said quietly, his hand unconsciously moving to where the crystal had once rested against his chest. Even now, months later, he sometimes felt its phantom weight, heard its whisper in his dreams. "The land where I destroyed the ring, a place of fire and darkness." "The dark side is strong here," Anakin added from the pilot station. "The lava, the heat, the violence of the planet itself, it all feeds into it. But that's exactly why this might work. You said the ring could only be destroyed in the place where it was made, right? Maybe the crystal shards can only be truly destroyed in a place of pure, primal power." Ahsoka, who'd become something of a friend to Frodo over the past months, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Are you sure you want to do this? We could send someone else to—" "No," Frodo interrupted gently. "This burden was mine from the moment I arrived here. I may not have created it, but I'm responsible for seeing it ended. Besides," he managed a small smile, "I've walked into a volcano before. Once you've done it once, The second time is almost routine. Almost, Yoda said from his meditation seat, his eyes still closed. But routine, this is not. Dangerous, Mustafar is. And not only for its environment. Sense something I do, a presence, dark and watchful. Frodo felt a chill despite the heat radiating from the planet below. Dooku? Perhaps. Obi-Wan said grimly. He escaped during the temple battle, but we've had reports of his movements near the Outer Rim. If he learned we were bringing the crystal shards here. He didn't finish the sentence, but Frodo understood. Dooku would want revenge, would want to reclaim what he'd lost. The cruiser shuddered as it entered Mustafar's atmosphere, and Frodo gripped the railing to steady himself. Through the viewport, he could see the planet's surface growing closer, black stone and orange fire, an alien hell that nonetheless felt terribly familiar. They landed at a Republic mining facility on the edge of a massive lava field. The facility was small, barely more than a handful of structures built on a platform suspended above the molten rock. Its inhabitants, miners and engineers who'd been evacuated for this mission, had left behind equipment and supplies, but the place felt abandoned, haunted. The primary caldera is 3 kilometers northeast, one of the clone troopers reported, consulting his datapad. Deepest lava flow on the planet. If we're going to dispose of the shards, that's our best bet. Then that's where we're going, Frodo said, adjusting the pack on his shoulders. Inside, contained in a specialized case designed by the Jedi, were all the crystal shards they'd recovered. 17 pieces of corrupted Kyber, each one pulsing faintly with dark hunger. The journey across Mustafar's surface was grueling. Even with environmental suits and force-assisted endurance, the heat was oppressive, the air thick with toxic gases. Frodo, smaller than his companions and less accustomed to this kind of extreme environment, struggled to keep pace. But he pushed forward, step by step, much as he'd pushed forward across the plains of Gorgoroth with the ring's weight threatening to crush him. "You're doing well," Obi-Wan said, staying close to Frodo's side. Over the past months, the Jedi Master had become something of a mentor to Frodo, teaching him about the galaxy while learning from Frodo's experiences with corrupted artifacts. "We're almost there." The caldera opened before them like a wound in the planet's surface, a vast pit of churning lava, its heat so intense that even their suits' cooling systems struggled to compensate. At its edge, a narrow bridge of black stone extended over the molten rock, ending in a platform that hung suspended above the heart of the flow. "That's it," Anakin said, pointing to the platform. "That's where we'll do it. Drop the shards in there, and nothing short of the Force itself could put them back together." They began crossing the bridge in single file, Yoda in the lead, followed by Obi-Wan, Frodo, Anakin, and Ahsoka, with a squad of clone troopers bringing up the rear. The bridge was narrow, barely wide enough for 2 people to stand side by side, and below it, the lava churned and bubbled like a living thing. They were halfway across when Yoda stopped suddenly, his ears flattening against his head. "Here they are," the ancient Jedi said softly. "Been waiting, they have." From the far side of the caldera, figures emerged from the heat haze. Droids, hundreds of them, their metal bodies reflecting the lava's orange glow. And at their head, standing on the platform where Frodo had meant to destroy the shards, stood Count Dooku. But Dooku had changed. The corruption from his brief contact with the crystal had left its mark. His skin was paler, almost translucent, and dark veins traced patterns across his face and hands. His eyes, once merely ruthless, now burned with an intensity that spoke of madness barely contained. "How predictable," Dooku called across the caldera, his voice amplified by the volcanic walls. "The noble Jedi, coming to destroy what they cannot control. But these shards aren't yours to destroy, Master Yoda. They belong to the Sith. They belong to my master, and through them, he will remake this galaxy." "Insane you have become," Yoda replied sadly. "The crystal's corruption, deeper it runs than I feared. Let us pass, Dooku. End this, we must. Oh, I intend to end this, Dooku said, and ignited his lightsaber. Behind him, the droids raised their weapons. But not the way you hope. The bridge erupted in blaster fire. Clone troopers returned fire while the Jedi deflected bolts with their lightsabers, the narrow confines making defense nearly impossible. Frodo ducked low, drawing sting as a droid managed to land on the bridge ahead of them. The elvish blade cut through its legs, sending it tumbling into the lava below. "We can't fight here," Ahsoka shouted over the chaos. "The bridge is too narrow. We're sitting targets." "Then we advance," Anakin called back, and leaped forward with force-enhanced speed, his lightsaber carving through droids as he pushed toward the platform. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka followed, their blades weaving patterns of defense and offense, while Yoda remained with Frodo and the troopers, protecting their rear as more droids attempted to cut off their retreat. Frodo watched Anakin fight, saw the young Jedi's power and skill, and felt something cold settle in his stomach. There was anger in Anakin's movements, a fury that went beyond simple combat necessity, the same fury he'd seen in Boromir's eyes when the ring's influence had taken hold. "Master Yoda," Frodo said urgently. "Anakin, there's something wrong. The way he's fighting, the anger in him." "See it, I do," Yoda replied, his own blade moving in precise arcs to deflect incoming fire. "The dark side, it calls to him. Strong in the Force he is, but strong in emotion also. A dangerous combination, that is." Anakin reached the platform, and Dooku was waiting. Their lightsabers clashed with a sound like thunder, crimson against blue, and the duel that followed was brutal in its intensity. Anakin fought with raw power and aggressive technique, pushing Dooku back, his face twisted with determination and something darker. "Yes," Dooku laughed even as he defended. "Feel your anger, your hatred. The Jedi have held you back, told you to suppress your emotions, to deny your true potential. But I see what you could become, Skywalker. I see the power in you." "I'm nothing like you," Anakin snarled, and pressed his attack harder. Frodo and the others reached the platform, and immediately the tactical situation became clear. They were surrounded. Droids on all sides, the bridge behind them crawling with more reinforcements, and Dooku dueling Anakin at the platform's edge. "The shards," Obi-Wan said urgently to Frodo. "Can you reach the edge? Can you drop them in?" Frodo looked at the churning lava below, then at the pack on his shoulders. It would mean crossing the platform, getting past the fighting, reaching the far edge where the heat was most intense. But wasn't that always the way? The burden had to be carried to the very end, no matter the cost. "I can do it," he said, and began moving. Yoda and Obi-Wan formed a protective corridor, their lightsabers deflecting blaster fire while Ahsoka covered Frodo's advance. Clone troopers fell one by one, overwhelmed by the sheer number of droids, but they bought seconds, precious seconds that Frodo used to push forward. He was 10 meters from the edge when Dooku's hand shot out, and the Force gripped him like an invisible vice. The pack was torn from his shoulders, flying through the air toward the Sith Lord. "No!" Frodo shouted, but it was already too late. Dooku caught the pack, his corrupted fingers fumbling with the clasps, and Frodo saw the madness in his eyes intensify. "Finally," Dooku breathed. "Finally, I can fix my mistake. I can take the power I was meant to have." Anakin's lightsaber struck Dooku's hand, severing it at the wrist. The Sith Lord screamed, and the pack fell, tumbling toward the lava below. Frodo didn't think. He simply moved, throwing himself toward the edge, his hand outstretched. His fingers closed around the pack's strap just as it was about to fall, and momentum carried him over the platform's edge. For a terrible moment, he hung suspended over the lava, the heat so intense he could feel his skin blistering even through his suit. The pack's weight pulled him down, and he realized with crystal clarity that he was about to fall, about to die in fire, just as he'd nearly died in Mount Doom. But a hand gripped his wrist, small, three-fingered, impossibly strong. Yoda held him, the ancient Jedi's face straining with effort as he pulled Frodo back from the edge. Behind them, Obi-Wan and Ahsoka held off the droids while Anakin stood over Dooku's collapsed form, his lightsaber raised for a killing blow. "Anakin, no!" Obi-Wan shouted. "He's defeated. It's not the Jedi way." For a long moment, Anakin stood frozen, his face a mask of conflict. Then, slowly, he lowered his blade and stepped back. Frodo scrambled to his feet, the pack still clutched in his hands. The shards inside were pulsing wildly now, responding to the violence, the anger, the dark side energy saturating this place. He could feel them calling to him, begging to be used, promising that if he just opened the case, just took one shard, he could end this battle, save his friends, become something more than a small hobbit far from home. He thought of the Shire, of Bag End, of Sam and Merry and Pippin, of Gandalf's words. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. He opened the case. The shards blazed with red light, their corruption visible even to those who couldn't sense the Force. But Frodo didn't take them. Instead, with steady hands, he tipped the case over the edge. The crystal shards fell, tumbling through the superheated air, and struck the lava with a sound like breaking glass amplified 1,000-fold. The caldera erupted, columns of fire shooting skyward as the corrupted Kyber met primal heat and pressure. The shards shattered, again and again, breaking into smaller and smaller pieces, their dark side energy dispersing into the planet's molten core. Frodo felt the moment they were truly destroyed, felt the whisper that had haunted him since arriving in this galaxy finally, truly go silent. It was like a weight lifting from his soul, like waking from a nightmare into blessed daylight. "It's done," he said softly. "They're gone." The droids, suddenly without direction, began to shut down or retreat. Dooku, one-handed and defeated, was dragged away by his remaining forces. The battle was over. As Republic ships descended to extract them, as the Jedi gathered their wounded and mourned their dead, Frodo stood at the caldera's edge and looked into the fire that had saved him. In Middle-earth, he'd failed at the crucial moment, had claimed the ring for himself, and been saved only by Providence. Here, in a galaxy far from everything he'd known, he'd succeeded. He'd carried his burden to its destruction, had resisted corruption, had proven that the smallest person could indeed change the course of the future. "Proud of you I am," Yoda said, appearing at his side. "Twice now, faced this trial you have. Twice succeeded. Though different, each success was. In Middle-earth, I failed," Frodo said. "I claimed the ring. I gave in at the very end." "Failed, you say?" Yoda tilted his head thoughtfully. "Resisted for months you did. Carried a terrible burden to the only place it could be destroyed. That the ring claimed you at the last, weakness that was not. Merely proof that mortal you are. Perfect, none of us are. Important, the trying is. The choosing, again and again, to resist." "And here," Frodo asked, "did I choose right?" "Alive you are," Yoda pointed out. "Destroyed, the crystals are. Saved, your friends are. Ask yourself, in your heart, did you choose right?" Frodo thought about it, really thought about it. He'd been given a second chance, a chance to face the same test, to carry the same burden, to prove that his failure with the ring wasn't the measure of who he was. And he'd succeeded. Not perfectly, perhaps. Not without help. But he'd done what needed to be done. "Yes," he said finally. "I chose right." "Then right, your choice was," Yoda said simply. On the journey back to Coruscant, Frodo stood in the cruiser's observation deck, watching the stars streak past in hyperspace. Anakin joined him, the young Jedi's face troubled. "I almost killed him," Anakin said without preamble. "Dooku, I wanted to kill him. The anger I felt, it scared me. But you didn't," Frodo pointed out. "You stopped. You chose mercy when vengeance was within your reach." "Because Obi-Wan stopped me," Anakin countered. "If he hadn't been there—" "But he was there," Frodo interrupted gently. "That's what fellowship means, Anakin. What friendship means. We're not meant to face these trials alone. We're meant to help each other, to catch each other when we stumble. I couldn't have destroyed the crystal without all of you. You couldn't resist the dark side's call without Obi-Wan. That's not weakness. That's wisdom." Anakin was quiet for a long moment. "You're pretty smart for someone so small." "I'm a hobbit," Frodo said with a slight smile. "We may be small, but we're not stupid." When they reached Coruscant, the council was waiting. They stood in the council chamber once again, the same circle of wise faces, the same view of the endless city. But this time, Frodo didn't feel like a supplicant or a curiosity. He felt like someone who'd earned his place. "Completed your task, you have," Yoda said formally. "Destroyed, the crystal shards are. Grateful, the Jedi Order is. But a question we must ask. Stay with us, will you? Much you could teach, much you could learn." Frodo looked around at the assembled Jedi, at Obi-Wan, who'd become a mentor, at Anakin, who'd become a friend, at Ahsoka, who reminded him of the hobbits of the Shire with her enthusiasm and courage, at Yoda, who'd shown him that wisdom had nothing to do with size or power. "I don't belong here," he said softly. "This isn't my galaxy. These aren't my people. But," he paused, gathering his thoughts, "but I've learned something in the time I've been here. Home isn't always a place. Sometimes it's the people you stand beside, the causes you fight for, the burdens you carry together." He looked at Yoda directly. "If you'll have me, if there's a place for a hobbit in your order, then yes, I'll stay. Until I find a way home, or until I'm no longer needed. Whichever comes first." "Always needed, you will be," Yoda said, his eyes twinkling with something that might have been joy. "A Jedi Knight, you cannot become. Feel the Force, you cannot. But a guardian of the light, a bearer of wisdom earned through suffering. That you already are." Mace Windu spoke up. "We'll establish a new position for you within the Order, an advisor of sorts. Someone who can help us understand the dangers of corrupted artifacts, who can teach us about resistance to darkness through means other than the Force. And someone," Obi-Wan added with a smile, "who can remind us that the smallest people sometimes cast the largest shadows." In the months that followed, Frodo Baggins became a fixture at the Jedi Temple. He walked its halls, studied its archives, and occasionally accompanied Jedi Knights on missions where his unique perspective proved invaluable. He taught youngling classes about courage and choice, sharing stories of Middle-earth and the fellowship that had shaped him. He made friends, not just among the Jedi, but among the clone troopers, the politicians of the Republic, even a few smugglers and rogues who found his earnestness refreshingly unusual. He learned more about the Force, about the war consuming the galaxy, about the ancient conflict between light and dark that predated even the oldest legends of Middle-earth. And sometimes, late at night, he would stand on one of the temple's highest balconies and look up at alien stars, wondering if somewhere in the infinite cosmos, the Shire still existed. If Sam was tending his garden, if Merry and Pippin were causing mischief at the Green Dragon, if life went on in that simple, beautiful place he'd once called home. But he didn't despair, because he'd learned something crucial during his time in this galaxy. Home wasn't something you lost. It was something you carried with you, in your heart, in your choices, in the way you treated others and faced adversity. He was Frodo Baggins, bearer of the ring, destroyer of corrupted crystals, friend to Jedi and guardian of the light. And whether in Middle-earth or in a galaxy far, far away, he would continue to prove that true courage had nothing to do with size or power. It came from the heart, and his heart, though scarred by the burdens he'd borne, remained unbroken. The war between the Republic and the Separatists would continue for years to come, its outcome still uncertain, its cost still mounting. But in the archives of the Jedi Temple, a new record was added. The account of a small being from another reality who'd carried darkness and refused to be consumed by it. Frodo's presence in the galaxy created ripples that would extend far beyond his initial arrival. Young Jedi who met him learned that strength came in many forms, that power wasn't measured in force sensitivity or lightsaber skill, but in the courage to make the right choice when the wrong one was easier. Clone troopers who fought beside him discovered that size meant nothing in battle, that a warrior's heart mattered more than their height. And Anakin Skywalker, who struggled daily with the dark side's whispers, found in Frodo a mirror of his own struggle, but also an example of someone who'd faced corruption and emerged intact. Their conversations, late at night in the temple's meditation rooms, helped ground Anakin in ways that traditional Jedi teaching couldn't. Here was someone who understood temptation intimately, who'd failed and succeeded, who didn't preach detachment but practiced resilient compassion. The Jedi Council, for their part, began to study the principles Frodo represented. They established new protocols for dealing with corrupted artifacts, created training programs focused on mental resistance to darkness, and, most importantly, started questioning whether their doctrine of emotional detachment was truly the only path to resisting the dark side. As for the crystal shards, destroyed in Mustafar's fire, their dark side energy dispersed into the galaxy's background noise. Still present, still dangerous, but no longer concentrated enough to corrupt. Some Jedi theorized that fragments might have survived, scattered across the outer rim, waiting to be discovered. It was a problem for another day, another group of heroes. Frodo stood on his balcony one final time before dawn, watching the sun rise over Coruscant. Somewhere out there, the Separatists plotted their next move. Somewhere, Count Dooku nursed his wounds and planned revenge. Somewhere, the mysterious Sith Lord called Darth Sidious watched and waited, his grand design still unfolding. But Frodo wasn't afraid. He'd learned, across 2 worlds and countless trials, that darkness could be resisted, that even when you fell, you could rise again, that the smallest light could hold back an ocean of shadow, if you had the courage to keep burning. He touched his chest where the crystal had once rested, felt the scar tissue where its corruption had tried to take root. The wound ached sometimes, especially in the cold, but it was a reminder, not of failure, but of survival, of victory, hard won. "May the Force be with you," Frodo whispered to the rising sun, using the phrase his new friends had taught him. And then, softer, in the language of his people, "Quio e fith," I will endure the darkness. And in a galaxy far, far away, a hobbit from the Shire proved that some burdens were worth bearing, some battles were worth fighting, and some lights would never be extinguished, no matter how far from home they found themselves.